Mental illness can come in many forms. So how can we recognize the signs? And what can the church do to help? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mental illness in the church, Part 2.
Welcome, everyone, to the Big E, the elephant in the room. My name is Melissa, and today we'll be talking about mental illness Part 2. Yes, Part 2. Previously, we did have an episode in our Season 1 about mental illness. The Big E thought it was very, very important to dive back into this topic. So many people of our viewership had various questions and concerns. So we took it upon ourselves to bring new experts on here to talk about mental illness. So let's welcome our guests. Today we have Angeline Walker. Angeline Walker, I can tell you, is a phenomenal woman. She is a counselor out of the the Mecklenburg school system in Charlotte. And she is a diligent worker and counselor for the Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. We also have a wonderful guest, Gary Graham. Now, some of you may know Gary Graham. He is known to be on Snack Time with the Graham. So it is a privilege and honor to have Gary on this show as well. So we thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in, and we are going to jump right into mental illness part 2. Now, I just want to just say, May also is Mental Illness Awareness Month. And a lot of issues and a lot of people have been struggling with mental illness due to the pandemic that has been brewing in our world today. So I just want to just first jump into Angeline. If you can just tell me a little bit about yourself, and also if you can tell me how it really has impacted you within this last year being a counselor, as a mental illness counselor.
Hi, thanks for having me, Melissa, and thanks for the introduction. Yes, I am a school counselor for Charlotte Mecklenburg School System. I've been a school counselor for over 20 years in New York and now in Charlotte. And I'm also a licensed clinical mental health counselor for the state of North Carolina. So I kind of have two different jobs, as always. um, but my primary job is as a school counselor. My secondary job is as a mental health counselor. I've worked for a variety of agencies. Currently, I'm working for Better Health as one of the counselors and therapists for them. I think this pandemic I have seen a variety of different issues come to the surface. I think a lot of people who have already struggled with mental illness we're seeing are really struggling that much more now. Keeping in mind that this pandemic has pretty much has been the traumatic event for everyone across the world. So we all are experiencing some form of trauma right now as a nation and as a world, right? And so we're seeing that people who have already had issues that they've been struggling with are really feeling that doubled down right now. Then if you haven't really had any mental illnesses, you are experiencing a mental health crisis. You know what I mean? So there's a difference between illness and the health. But right now, I would say that the majority of us are experiencing some sort of mental health crisis with this pandemic as well.
Well, I truly thank you so much for that input and also diving in and for your dedication, especially during this critical time in our communities. So, Gary Graham, if you can just tell me a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how the pandemic has really transformed you in being a mental health counselor over this pandemic.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me on the Big E. Been looking forward to it for a long time, and want to say a big shout out to my colleague all the way in North Carolina, Angelique. So I've been doing this for about 3 years. 2019, I started my private practice. In 2020, the summer of 2020, things took off, and I've got to see the whole spectrum of mental illness, especially with our Black males and our Black females, couples. And Angeline could attest to this, our kids who have missed school. And it's amazing when people get out of sequence. And here's the funny thing. When they get out of sequence, it's not even a mental illness. The mental illness has been embedded in them a long time. And because they go in sequence, and actually COVID has unzombieized, everybody was a zombie, going to work, going to church, doing the same thing over and over. And when COVID came, everybody stopped being a zombie. And then what opened up is their real feelings about, like, yo, I've been married to this person for 20 years and I hate them. I can't stand my kids. You know, that little alone time has really gone. And then you find out about your real self. So mental illness is real. And I'm very happy that I can put a real perspective on it.
And I'm sorry, but it's so like interesting for you to say that, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I said, wow, this thing is really going to cause the cats to come out the bag, because we were all running on that treadmill, that rat race. And as soon as that the plug was pulled out of that treadmill, everybody was like, what do we do? And we realized that a lot of people use their job. One thing I realized is that a lot of people use their job as their way of coping, as their way of being validated, you know, as their way of, you know, even being able to communicate with others. And a lot of people don't want to be at home doing that. So like you said, you know, this pandemic has those things had already exist, but this pandemic brought things to the surface that we just were not prepared for.
It's almost like their scapegoat. That's really what it fell down to. It was like everyone had that place to run to get away from their normalcy in home. So, you know, and they really saw the transparency when they had to actually be with their loved ones every day. So that really
but the other part of everyone. The other part of that, Melissa, is what about the people that don't have anyone at home? So their whole existence was based on going out and going to work.
That's true.
So I have a question now, since we're diving into this pandemic question here. This is something that I feel that a lot of people are having an issue with. What are some of the different type of mental illnesses that people are suffering with now? What have y'all noticed that when y'all have clients or patients come in, what have you been seeing an influx of maybe the top 3 or 4 mental illnesses that have really went on a rise?
Well, I'm going to start with the overall anxiety, the true anxiety. So I'll share with everybody what's the difference. Like today, because I know Melissa, I had a mutual friend that called me about Miss Walker, that I'll be on the show with them. So my anxiety level went up, you know, and I was kind of nervous to come on the show, even though I do this all the time and what have you. But then the reality of anxiety is people don't know what's happening tomorrow. Like a perfect example. Last year, this time, everybody wanted a cure or an answer to COVID. And now, no matter where you look at it, whether you agree with it or not, the vaccine is the answer. Now the vaccine has become a new anxiety. Should I take it or shouldn't I take it? And now the next wave of anxiety is, and this is for Sister Walker or Miss Walker, is that are we going to go back to school in the fall? It all comes in droves. It comes in waves. So number one is anxiety. And the number 2 thing, and this is what I see in my private practice, is that couples, I cannot tell you how many couples has come to me and says, it's the pandemic. And I'm like, nah, it was really you. you hated you hated your husband, or you hated your wife, or you hated your boyfriend, or what have you, and the anxiety in the couples unit, that family unit, has been compromised through COVID, especially within the last year and a half.
And adding to that, I would say also depression is probably number one before. Well, I always say anxiety and depression are like first cousins.
Mhm.
But depression as well. And these are like people who have already, of course, suffered with depression or really having a very difficult time. But also not just because of the pandemic, but because of also maybe losing loved ones or knowing someone that's lost a loved one.
Mhm.
And in addition to that anxiety, there's also a lot of social anxiety that I'm seeing, where clients are afraid to go back out,
Mhm.
are afraid to like kind of get back into the normalcy. They don't know how to act. I have a client who is having a difficult time with going back out with her friends and being around people because there's this fear of, well, what if they're not vaccinated? What if they don't wear a mask? What if, and it's just like Gary said, it's like a snowball effect of a lot of different anxieties. But I'm seeing in the schools, I'm seeing a lot of we're doing a lot of like emotional regulation with our kids because our kids are having a hard time managing their emotions during right now. Their ability to express how they're really feeling is really something that we're seeing there, and where we would call it acting out. They're just bad. No, they're really having a hard time. And
Mhm.
it frustrates me when people act like we're not in a pandemic, because I'm
Mhm.
always the one ringing the bell like, hello, we're in a pandemic, because people act like it kind of got swept under the rug last week. I'm like, no, we're still there. And
Yeah.
one of my parents actually, and teacher had a concern about one of the kids, because they felt that he had ADHD. He can't keep his legs still. He can't, and I said, you know what? We're in a pandemic because a lot of times ADHD symptoms look like anxiety symptoms. I'm sorry, look like ADHD in kids.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say when you've only had the kid maybe 2 times in your classroom, that he's been home, then back in class. And, they're going back and forth every other
Mhm.
week
Mhm.
because of what's been happening. And we don't consider how our kids are impacted by
Yeah.
that mentally, the adjustments. For a lot of people, adjusting to something different is very difficult.
Yes.
Very,
And
very difficult.
so this brings it to this point. Do you think childhood trauma is one of the causes for some of the children that may be suffering with mental illness?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to start saying by this, and I'm going to put it practical. 20 years ago, one of my favorite things in mental health, and I'm also a public health person, is that 9/11 did not end on 9/11.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. Same thing for 2020. This pandemic may be over for some people, but you have not seen the lasting effects for the next 20 years. And
Mhm.
so we are still in a traumatic state. I'm going to share something with you, and part of my practice is to be transparent. I haven't cut my hair since March 12th of 2020. Haven't cut it. And you see me on a couple of shows. My hair is
Yes,
like
yes,
this.
yes.
You know what I
Gary
mean?
said yes, it was.
Now I'm bringing it over. I don't want nobody touching my hair because I have my own protocols. And
Mhm.
so I may go to a therapist. I may go to Walker, and she's like, Gary, it's okay to get your hair cut. I'm like, nah. You need to come over my house. You need to get sprayed down. And before you touch my hair, you need to go through my protocol. And that may last for the next 6 or 7 years because of what happened before. So
Mhm.
if I'm
Mhm.
going through that as a male in his mid 50s, lower 50s, let me put that way. I wonder what my kids are going through. And I say my kids, my black and brown kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I've been
Well,
my husband's barber since last year, and it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. And Melissa knows me. I'm the kitchen beautician at home, so I'm
yes,
doing everyone's hair. No
yes,
one has been at
yes.
a barber shop or beauty salon since March 13th, 2020.
Yes, and you are very good at what you do because you have definitely done my hair.
I
So
may
I
have to
wish
come
you
down there
well.
because I don't want just anybody touching my hair. That's fine.
I mean,
Well,
really, we've had to buy our own shops, to buy our equipment, and really, a lot of people are renovating their homes because of that anxiety and the
yes,
fear. But if I can
yes,
answer your question, Melissa, there's a variety of things that cause. It's not just childhood trauma, and as Gary alluded, sometimes it's just it's trauma firsthand as an adult that you've experienced, like 9/11, this pandemic. There's secondary trauma that people have experienced. People who watch television and all they're watching is negative news all day long. How do you think that impacts their mental health? And if they've and then there's underlying. I'm sorry, I know you got to go, but I just want to say that there's also underlying conditions that can be due to hereditary as well. So
well,
epigenetics.
I thank you guys for this input. We're not going anywhere, ladies and gentlemen that are tuning in. We just have to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We know that God has called you to a mission, but sometimes you need a little help getting there. At the Center for Clergy and Church Support, we strive to encourage, empower, and equip ministries and nonprofit organizations to do all that God has called them to do. We handle basic legal issues, conduct administrative and financial audits, and strengthen organizations in community engagement and capacity building. Let us help your ministry or nonprofit in advancing the kingdom of God. Visit clergycenter.org for more.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying tuned to the Big E, the elephant in the room. My name again is Melissa, and we have wonderful guests, Gary Graham and Angeline Walker. We just left off about childhood trauma that impacts children with mental illness. So I want to dive in to find out, how are you really able to, as counselors, how can you be able to differentiate and separate yourself dealing with individuals that are suffering from mental illness?
Well, I could say for me, everyone has their own coping strategies and what works for them and help. Because as counselors, one of the things we talk about a lot for ourselves is self-care and being able to either have your own therapist or find some way to kind of release all this information that's pouring into you. And one, of course, my favorite statements is, how can you pour from an empty cup, right? So for me, I spent my family is everything. Doing things with my family, prayer, attending church services, and just kind of staying grounded, but also remembering that I've been gifted with an opportunity to help serve someone else. And so I don't take that for granted at all. And if I have to separate for a minute because one of my clients might have said something that was a little offensive, then I need to separate for a minute and just take a minute to be self-aware with how I'm feeling at the moment so that I can come back, because I don't take for granted that I'm doing a service.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost like you, Sister Walker. I split in two ways. My wife told me the other day that I need a therapist because I do a lot. I go from 7 to 7 between administration and seeing people. So I break it down this way. My family, I have no problem saying Nilsa, Tony, and Pat and Paul. Those are my reality people. They keep me grounded. My sister-in-law and their kids, they keep me grounded. And then I have a crew of therapists. My top therapist is a lady by the name of Teresa Pica. We're only friends, but I look to her when I have these hard decisions to make, and she give me some insight. You probably know Monica Prendergast. She's a person in the field in the social work. She's a little bit more advanced. She's a little bit more advanced than I am, so I go to her. And you can look this person up, Dr. Oviedo Williams. I knew her from the days of Clara Barton, and she has been a good resource. So when I really need to get something, or if I want to get off track, or I feel something that I don't feel like myself, I call those people. And here, at the end of the day, my son says to me that, Daddy, you are the king of load management. If I don't feel like talking to anybody, I'm canceling all my appointment. Because just like Angeline said, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So Orchard Beach is waiting for me right there. And I go out there when nobody's out there. So, I'm back on my exercise regimen. So I try to keep things even. So that's how I roll.
Mhm.
So, do you really think mental illness, anyone that's suffering from mental illness, is there really truly a cure, or individuals just have to stay consistent with counseling or be on medication?
I think that individuals have to acknowledge that they have a propensity to react a certain way
Hmm.
under when they are triggered, right? And so with that, again, with my clients, I stress the importance of self-awareness. You have to know how your body reacts, how your thoughts and your feelings are when certain triggers are presented. And
Hmm.
once you get an idea of what that is, because a lot of people don't really understand what's going on with them, until I point
Yeah.
things out in therapy, like, do you realize you said this and then you said this, and that's two contradicting, statements. So being able to be self-aware and understanding that when these triggers come, there are certain coping strategies that you can employ and that you have choices to do that is
Hmm.
something that a lot of people struggle with, because changing a mindset is not something that happens overnight. So would I say there's a cure? I don't know if that I can't say cure, but I would say that, understanding yourself and understanding how you tick is important, and not being kind of being ignorant or stubborn when it comes to those things.
Yes. Any insight on that, Gary?
So Magic Johnson said a couple of years ago that he was cured of AIDS, and everybody went crazy. But he's
Hmm.
on a HIV regimen. Okay,
Mhm.
uh, so let me just put it this way: we're dying every day. Okay, and I get worse every day. So I find things to extend my life that what God has given me. So curable, I think just mental illness comes in seasons. So a great thing is like the other week I'll be transparent. It's like, I think I got ADHD. And then when I went through the progressions, it's like, no, you look at your phone too much, and that's why you waste so much time, and that's why you can't make your deadlines, and that's why you're so late. And it's like, well, thank God I don't have ADHD. I'm just a person that does not got my time, uh, that my time together. So
Hmm.
I go back to what Sister Walker said. You have to check yourself over and over and over again.
Mhm.
You wake up with a
Hmm.
cough or a pain the other day. It's not that there's a disease on you. You slept bad in the bed for the last 3 days, but we just ignore it and we make things
Ignore the
fester.
sign.
So
Yes.
let me just say this part. Mental illness is serious. And in our Black community, when you just talked about Sister Walker, I bet you she keeps a clean kitchen and she keeps a clean bathroom. And it's like, oh, she has OCD. No, she doesn't have OCD. She's just a clean woman. And so we
Hmm.
kind of interject these things and say it's mental health. And then we devalue what mental illness is. So
Mhm.
Hmm.
it covers a whole gamut. So me being on this program is a crusade to teach people the same way. No
Hmm.
cure. Yes, there's no cure. Curable, moving to a great mark or a better place. Yes, you can say that.
And if I could
Okay.
piggyback off of that metaphor that you use about the clean kitchen, for some people, they clean their kitchen because that is the way they cope. That
Yeah, the
is their
coping,
way of,
yeah,
like
coping
I
mechanism. Yeah.
found for myself that I have a tendency of, if my laundry room is clean,
Hmm.
and for some reason the laundry has to be put away every Sunday. If not, my week is going to be messy.
Yes.
I don't know where that came from, but once I
Hmm.
realized that that was the way I tick, I
Hmm.
needed to make sure that I started laundry early so I wasn't overwhelmed with it, so that it was done by Sunday. Because for me to keep myself together, it has to be done. And that's the thing, that's the self awareness that we need to have for ourselves, just like Gary said, so that we're able to stay on top of these things, because triggers happen all the time. They
Hmm.
happen all the time.
So you said self-awareness, Angeline. So I'm going to dive right in because the biggie, the elephant in the room, we really want to make sure the church develops new ways and strategies to make the difference in their congregation and just overall. So, is there ways the church can do better to serve families or their loved ones suffering from mental illness? Can they create more of a better of a support system in the church, or just some guidance, or to just really help them?
So I'm gonna jump in here if you don't mind, Gary. Because so the church, the church means well, right? But the church is not always comprised of mental health professionals. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've come across situations where like pastors have asked me, what do I do with this parishioner? We've gotten her a place to stay. We've paid her phone bills and her utilities. Um, we don't know what else to do. She just doesn't seem to understand how to keep herself together. And I'm like, really, it's not. And I have to say to him, it's not your responsibility. Like, who do you have that's qualified to care for this woman who has some sort of maybe a personality disorder or something that's making it difficult for her to stay organized and to stay on top of her care? And so I had to push him in the direction of some services that can provide that care for this woman, because what you're looking for, thinking that you can pray it away and throw a few dollars away, you're just going to be frustrated because that's not the answer.
Mm-hmm. Any
So
insight
my
on?
so my answer to that is simply this, and I'm going to let the church off the hook with this. Go to any church website, uh, and let's see if there's a referral system to any services in the community. You
Mm-hmm.
come
And there
back with
isn't.
that, and there isn't.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but and then you could go to any churches or conferences communication site. They'll talk about, Sister Dixon gave away food, or Sister Walker uh,
Mm-hmm.
talked about this on the Big E, but they do not have a column where they can click and say mental health illness, this person. And here's a simple thing, right? When
Mm-hmm.
I was growing up in church, we knew who the nurses were on duty,
Yes.
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
It was like Sister Graham is the nurse on duty today. Mom was the nurse on duty today. But what
Yep.
happens if somebody has an episode or if
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
somebody is hungry? That information is not in the bulletin. So, we need to rework what we do. And there are people, just like I tell people, and we have another conversation on the pandemic, there are people who wake up in the morning and says, oh, there's an outbreak in Wuhan, China. There's an epidemic. They live for this. There are people who live for helping people who are mentally ill. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
on a higher level, more than me and Sister Walker. And they want to put it on your bulletin board, and they want to put it in there. They want, when the pastor come in or the secretary comes in, I'm using my church as an example, call Gary Graham. Here's the hotline number that you need to call. So you have to be intentional where this is.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is the first year that churches. I sat on a couple of different panels for a couple of different churches this year. This first time that I've ever heard of churches even having for their AY programs topics about mental illness. This year that has happened. But that is such a wonderful idea and a great point, Brother Graham, because just like there is a nurse on duty, maybe the churches should consider having a crisis response team on duty as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we truly, truly appreciate everyone tuning in. I thank you so much for our guests, our panel guests, Gary Graham and Angeline Walker. Any last quick words? We just a minute words to just close out. Any phone numbers, any guidance to give our viewers if they need any help with any loved ones or family members that are dealing with mental illness that you would like to share?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having us, and thanks for putting this on this platform, using this platform for this information. Because as Gary said a few times, mental illness is real, and we need to not play around with it. And if we have a loved one or know a friend who has been saying things that just doesn't sound like them, or behaving in ways that seem like it's not right, have conversations with them and let them know that you're there to care. And if you're not a qualified professional, then seek one. We're not hard to find. Seek one and see if you can at least support that person through the process. A lot of times people give up with the first therapist because it wasn't a good match, or or if they have to be on medication, they give up because the medication didn't work the first time. Just like you wouldn't give up on blood pressure medicine if it didn't work the first time, don't give up on your mental health.
We thank you again, guests, for being part of this topic, mental illness. And as we always say, thank you for watching The Big E, the elephant in the room, where we speak about the unspeakable.
Welcome to What's Going On? My name is Demita Joe. Each Wednesday, you can find me here at 3 p.m. I'll be over here discussing different things that are going on and try to bring you a boost of positivity for your week because we all need this. We're going to share some feel-good stories. We might find a hometown hero. We may take a look at some trending topic. And sometimes we might even find a lesson in a not-so-warm and fuzzy story if we can. I'm Demita Joe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode right here on What's Going On?
This is Tyron
and Nicole with your weekly RATV news break. Each Thursday at 12 noon Eastern, we'll come to you with the latest news, trends, and more with a positive spin.
We know there's a lot of positive news that doesn't get reported, but we want to give you the opportunity to share your story here on RATV. If you have a positive news story you want us to share, you can submit your story to news@re-tv.net.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Relationship Entertainment Television YouTube channel. Download the new RATV Live app on your mobile device and follow Relationship Entertainment Television on your favorite social media platform.
Don't forget, make sure you tune into the RATV News Break each Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Until then, be blessed and be great.
Hey, it's your girl Tia Robertson. I'm the host of Entrepreneur Insider. Right here on RATV, every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for entrepreneurs and news that you need to know about. See you there.
Growing up in the church, we saw a lot. Things that people refuse to talk about. The elephants in the room. Mental illness, sexual abuse, broken families, domestic violence, and so much more. The Big E, the elephant in the room, is a show that sheds light on these topics. We're here to speak about the unspeakable.